Pro wrestling and controversy are intrinsically tied together like any good feud should. When working well, it can create true magic and memorable moments for all to enjoy for decades. When not working so well together, it can kinda the bed.
Just for the record, we won't be discussing Chris Benoit in this video, mainly just because I tried to keep these on the lighter side of things, if that exists. Nor will we be discussing anything directly tied to Vince McMahon, because that needs to be a video in and of itself.
Now that we have that all out of the way, let's get those dirt sheets fresh off the presses. This is Extreme League Wrestling, and here are our most controversial moments in wrestling history.
AEW Brawl Out / Brawl In.
I didn't hit anybody, I just choked him a little bit. Now imagine saying that to your boss or an HR representative at your work. I bet it'd be a real funny haha moment between the two of you. Look, I have a whole Mindy's Muffin-sized video on the whole Brawl Out situation already if you hit the card here. TLDR, everybody's wrong in the situation. Brawl In, though, was CM Punk's swan song inside of AEW, and unfortunately it happened at the company's biggest show ever.
After a disagreement over a spot involving Real Glass and Jack Perry, CM Punk put his foot down and said that the former Jungle Boy wasn't gonna do that on his show. All was well and good until the story was leaked to the dirt sheets by CM Punk's camp, which understandably made Jack Perry pretty angry. During his all-in buy-in match for the FTW title against Hook, Jack was going to be readying a move where he would flip the cold-hearted handsome devil onto a car windshield parked at the entrance ramp. He then knocked on the windshield, looked right down the lens of the camera and said, "Yeah, it's Real Glass, cry me a river."
After the match, the two would pass each other in a corridor at Wembley Stadium that saw a short conversation leading to a CM Punk chokehold of Jack Perry. Less than a week later, in CM Punk's hometown, Tony Khan would come out to announce that he had fired Phil Brooks from All Elite Wrestling with cause. While doing press for WrestleMania 40, CM Punk sat down with Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour, where he discussed why he left the company, the incident that happened at All In, and gave his opinion on AEW, that it would only be successful as long as Tony Khan wanted to put money into it. How did AEW respond? By showing the entire incident on AEW Dynamite as I'm recording this. If anything, I feel more spiritually connected to Chris Hero now more than ever.
So who's wrong in this situation? Well, everyone really. Time and time again, we've seen Tony Khan have failures in communication with AEW talent, along with kind of forgetting, he's the boss. Lord knows this man also went to the Drake School of Twitter conflict solution. For his credit, Jack Perry kinda had a right to be upset with Punk's camp continuously leaking backstage information to dirt sheets. But there's a time, place, and easier ways to bring this up. It's quite funny when you think about it, but Luke Perry having sex one time kinda led to The Rock being at WrestleMania 40. Now the scapegoat seems to be toiling away in New Japan until his contract is up or TK puts on his big boy pants.
Don't get me wrong, I love CM Punk in a nostalgic way, honestly, more than most of my family members. But just in case anyone needs a little education on this, you don't actually fight your coworkers. I feel like I've been saying this for about 2 years at this point. Everyone needs to get over it. Punk, Perry, Khan, the Bucks, everyone, and especially the IWC. Let's move on. Wrestling's great right now. I just want to enjoy it.
Billy and Chuck.
I'm happy to see in our country in the past few decades, we've done a lot of work being able to accept people of all different sexual orientations, men, women, and everyone in between. And for a while in the 2000s, we thought WWE was actually going to be at the forefront of change. With Chuck Palumbo being kicked out of the alliance, Billy Gunn would come to his aid, and the two would start tagging together against the man's former faction.
The two would begin to grow more affectionate towards each other, suggesting that they were in a homosexual relationship. They would soon add Rico, their personal stylist, and the group would go on to pick up a couple of WWF tag titles. The organization GLAAD even praised the company for portraying gay individuals in the sport that had long seen a history of homophobia. The 2000s, everyone. Poorly aged gay jokes, boy bands, and dial-up internet. Cut to 2002, where the couple were set to have an on-air commitment ceremony on the September 12th episode of SmackDown. Billy and Chuck, during the ceremony, dropped the entire act, stating that it was all a publicity stunt.
The two were then beaten down by 3-minute warning, and the team was essentially nullified. GLAAD would later rescind their support of the company, stating that the WWE lied to us 2 months ago when they promised Billy and Chuck would come out and wed on air. All heat from the situation has seemed to have really died down over the years, and people kind of laugh about the angle now, and really, it's so great to see the contrast between then and now on how gay individuals are shown within the world of professional wrestling. Easy to say, we're all better off.
Crown Jewel 2018.
Wrestling and politics are more intrinsically linked than you might think, with the rise of Hulkamania in Ronald Reagan's America's First 80s, all the way to international politics in the infamous Collision in Korea event. When it comes to the world stage, wrestling can be a great show of force.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia struck a deal with the WWE to bring 2 shows to the kingdom per year. Outside of this entry, many fans, wrestlers, and beyond have taken issue with the country's massive human rights violations against the countries of Yemen, Syria, along with suppressing the rights of women in the country. This led to many performers like Bryan Danielson, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn boycotting these shows entirely.
Other than these worldwide issues, more controversy would be aimed towards the Kingdom and WWE after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was a journalist that was extremely critical of the Saudi Arabia government, even highlighting and bringing to light a lot of the human rights violations of the kingdom. So, during a trip to Turkey to gain documentation for an upcoming wedding, Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside of the consulate for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul, an act carried out by order of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman.
With news breaking weeks before the 2018 edition of Crown Jewel, calls stormed for WWE to cancel the show. Things were even getting dicey for performers who weren't boycotting the shows, much like Mayor of Knox County Glenn Jacobs, better known as Kane. Not only was he scheduled for the show, but Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon, was currently serving on then-President Donald Trump's cabinet. The event, despite the controversy, would press on though, with Chief Brand Officer Stephanie McMahon stating that it was a hard decision, but it had to be made out of business necessity. To be fair, if my business partner also ordered the unaliving of someone, I too wouldn't want to piss them off.
The show itself was extremely forgettable, mainly because it was utter and complete ass. Mr. Potato Fist himself, Shane McMahon, won the Greatest Wrestler Ever tournament, and also, you brought Shawn Michaels out of retirement? For this bullshit? Luckily, it seems like things with the Saudi Arabia kingdom have gotten a little bit better human rights wise, and we've even seen some past boycotting performers show up at new events.
New Jack.
I know what you're thinking. Oh, New Jack, is he going to talk about Gypsy Joe, Mass Transit, Vic Grimes? Yes, the answer is yes. All of them are the entry on this list. Jerome Young, better known as ECW's New Jack, was known for his violent outbursts that went way past the flair of professional wrestling. I want to make something very clear. Out of respect for the dead, I don't wish for this to be some type of hit piece towards Jerome Young. Unfortunately, he did pass away in 2021 at the age of 58, and he clearly meant a lot to a lot of people. Also, I don't know how he could still hurt me, but I still have a feeling he can.
The mass transit incident saw the near unaliving of a 17-year-old kid in the middle of the ring. Eric Koulis, wrestling under the name Mass Transit, had lied to Paul Heyman stating that he was 21 in order to replace Axel Rotten on an ECW card. Koulis apparently angered New Jack by asking the veteran to take a little bit more offense than he found necessary, especially from this no-name. New Jack then attacked the 17-year-old with a surgical scalpel, separating 2 arteries and making him pass out in the middle of the ring. New Jack honestly has a laundry list of incidents. Some could even fill an entire video in and of themselves, but I would frankly like to be able to eat today. The man grew up in a home that frankly no child ever should, full of abuse and physical violence. If you want to take a deeper dive into what makes Jerome Young, I would highly recommend his Dark Side of the Ring episode. It does way more justice to the guy than I ever could do in some silly YouTube video. WrestleMania Women's Battle Royals.
Women have most definitely seen a change in perception over the years, from barely being on the card, to maybe having a 5-minute match, to main eventing the biggest show of the year.
While WWE has shown that change can happen on a large scale, let's also not forget that it's also shown how sad the state of the division can be. Take WrestleMania 25, for example, and the Women's Battle Royal to crown Miss WrestleMania. Yeah, it goes about as well as you think. Don't get me wrong, I'm the last person who should complain about anything about the pageant industry, being that I know nothing of the sorts. The world of professional wrestling, though, is a completely different ballgame.
No woman got their own entrance for this historic match. No, they were all sung to the ring by the human embodiment of Newport Smoke and an empty natty light can, Kid Rock. Not to also mention this very prestigious match was won by Santino Marella in drag, a celebration of women indeed.
Moving on to another women's battle royal at WrestleMania. God, maybe this is why the company stopped doing these. WrestleMania 34 saw the introduction of the Fabulous Moolah Battle Royal. If it was as simple as naming one after Andre the Giant for the men, why can't you do it for the ladies? Seems like a no-brainer.
Moolah was a multiple-time women's champion and a trailblazer for women in the business. Well, if it was that simple, it wouldn't be on this list now, would it?
A large backlash occurred after the announcement, with many coming forward recounting their tales of abuse dished out by Moolah to her trainees. Exploitation of the grossest degree came to light, and I like making money off my videos, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but think of the worst thing you can think of, yeah, it's probably that. The match name was soon changed, but not until Snickers spoke out against the controversy, stating in so many words that it would be kind of a dick move to name this match after someone who did more to hinder women's wrestling than promote it. Sometimes that sweet sponsor money can be used for good.
The name was soon changed, and I guess a man didn't win this one. Progress?
Muhammad Assan.
It's a turbulent time in the United States with the persecution of a minority religious group. Vince smells an angle!
Muhammad Assan, played by Mark Cabani, a man of Italian descent, was an Arab-American character that, mind you, was a heel who was enraged by the xenophobia seen across the US post 9/11. Which, yeah, base take funny enough.
After his Raw debut, he would go on to feud with the likes of the Hurricane and Chris Jericho. On the July 4th tape of SmackDown, Assan was set to go one-on-one against The Undertaker for the #1 contendership to the WWE title. This match would see an angle that saw Assan praying at the top of the ramp as The Undertaker was beaten down by masked men in the ring.
3 days later, when the episode aired, it would unfortunately be on the same day as the infamous London bombings. UPN, the network that aired SmackDown at the time, pressured WWE to remove the Muhammad Assan character. The Undertaker would give the character one last ride off the entrance ramp, ending that character's run and Mark Cabani in WWE as a whole.
Sure, the idea and the character of Assan was probably a little too close to home for many people, being that America and the rest of the world was still in the heat of the war on terror. But for Cabani, unfortunately, he would be forced out of WWE and wrestling for forces not within his own control.
The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
If Vince McMahon is anything, he sure is a fickle bitch. And while the company might try to have a better take on the Ultimate Warrior as of now, prior to 2014, Toxic would be putting it kindly.
From being fired from the company in 1992 and 1996, Jim Hellwig was in and out of court with the WWF throughout the decade. Signing with rival WCW in 1998 most definitely did not help things.
Cut to 2005, and WWE is set to release The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, a glorified hit piece painting the guy as an egotistical maniac.
Now don't get me wrong, Hellwig wasn't a saint, to be quite honest with you, having many homophobic and racist opinions that have kinda soured me over his legacy. The film itself highlights the toxic nature of 80s wrestling culture to the highest degree, with solely one initiative, to paint Warrior in the worst light possible. Hellwig would be asked to be part of the documentary, but he would decline, and damn, can you blame him?
Then again, calling the guy that okayed this film petty is the least offensive adjective I could give him.
Bill DeMott and NXT.
When it comes to becoming a professional wrestler, choosing who to train you could be one of the biggest decisions of your career. And you figure if you're going to the newly formed WWE Performance Center, you would be in the best hands possible to start your pro wrestling journey. This unfortunately isn't the case when the head trainer creates a culture that is less than accepting.
Enter former wrestler Bill DeMott. DeMott most definitely had the resume for the job, being a former WCW United States champion. In 2015, it had come to light from former trainees at the WWE Performance Center, alleging that Bill had used racist language, bullying tactics, homophobic slurs, and sexual harassment. As time went on, more people came to speak up about their experiences with the trainer, including the likes of Kenny Omega, Brian Myers, and Ryan Nemeth. Bill declined any and all allegations, and WWE cleared him through an internal investigation. But come on, I trust a group of 5-year-olds who have been stealing cookies more than I trust WWE to investigate themselves.
DeMott would later choose to step down in order to, quote, save the company from damage or embarrassment, and hasn't worked in the industry since. Man, Vince era WWE, giving pro wrestling YouTubers shit to talk about for decades to come.
The inception of ECW.
This governing body would see that all regional wrestling promotions would thrive together, and it would see the rise of the likes of the Von Erichs, Ric Flair, and Hulk Hogan. Well, until Vince McMahon played IRL Monopoly a little too hard.
The NWA, though, was still a governing body, and come on, this is pro wrestling. Politicking is baked into it like steroids in baseball. Oh yeah, I guess in pro wrestling too, I guess. At the time, Eastern Championship Wrestling was holding a tournament to crown a new NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. Like many other promoters before him, Paul Heyman butted heads with the higher-ups over at the NWA. One feather that they could put in their cap at the end of the night, though, was that their guy Shane Douglas would be victorious on the night and be the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So, at the end of the main event, Shane Douglas held up the NWA World title and said, "Of Kerry Von Erich, of the Fat Man himself, Dusty Rhodes, this is it tonight. Dad, God, that's beautiful. And Steamboat, and they can all kiss my ass." Douglas then threw the title onto the ground and held up the newly minted ECW Heavyweight Championship and kicked off Extreme Championship Wrestling. NWA officials called the move a disgrace, and ECW would be fully removed from the NWA territory system.
Heyman thought wrestling needed a shot in the arm, because to quote the man's Hall of Fame speech, wrestling in 1993 was kinda shit. But the NWA, being a legacy brand, didn't want to see any of Paul Heyman's changes over a promotion that was in their jurisdiction. ECW was one of the most influential promotions within professional wrestling. It burned bright and would be gone by the end of the decade, and while controversial at the time, it's hard not to say that it was worth it.
The Rock and Mankind beyond the mat.
The Rock is for sure one of the goats of professional wrestling, and Mick Foley has put himself through so much punishment, it's not hard to see why he's known as the hardcore legend. The two would face off many times throughout their career, but none would be more memorable for all the wrong reasons than their I Quit WWF title match at the 1999 Royal Rumble.
Foley was known for taking on massive amounts of pain and was not going to let this one be without something memorable. It would unfortunately be for a terrifying reason this time. The match would start with Mankind taking a massive amount of punishment, which was par for the course for the hardcore legend, but this time it was a bit more harder to watch. The Rock would hit Foley with multiple unprotected head shots with a chair while his hands were tied behind his back. At the end of the day, there were over a dozen hits Mick took to the skull.
It's even harder to watch when you see it through the lens of the Beyond the Mat documentary, and to see the horror on his kid's and wife's face is kind of really hard to see.
The sad part of it all is that beforehand, Mick actually sat down with his children and explained what was going to be happening and that The Rock could be trusted because he was their father's friend. The only problem was that The Rock went off script because of a miscommunication between himself and the booker.
Foley would later state that The Rock didn't even apologize after this miscommunication, and while the two have seemed to have smoothed things over, I don't think that this is something that The Rock is going to want in very many of his hype packages moving forward. And that is our list for the most controversial wrestling moments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. What is your favorite wrestling controversy? Go ahead and let us know in the comments down below. This has been Extreme League Wrestling, and we'll catch you next time.